Can I just acknowledge too how lovely it is to see Dawn White today. So as Paul said earlier, so diamond number 13, and also Madeline Wiesner, diamond number 32. We Googled you, Madeline. So I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness here today. So I'd like to really thank you for having me as your guest today. It's just absolutely lovely to be back here. As Jason said, I was here for nearly 10 years, so it's really lovely to be back. As you might have guessed, I'm a passionate advocate for sport, and in particular for women's sport, no surprise really. So I really appreciate these kinds of opportunities. So it's my goal now to have you all signed up by the end of the day as either players or sponsors. Don't worry, because at Netball SA we have something for everyone. As everyone here knows, South Australian opened its borders to the double vax yesterday, and so far, fingers crossed, it all seems to be going well. Apparently the Premier tells us the airport was like a scene of love, actually. It's being treated as a milestone on our return to normality, and believe me when I say there is no sector happier about it than sport, and no individual more pleased than me. It's been an incredibly tough couple of years for netball. In fact, for me, I sort of feel like 20 and 21 have merged into just one long, continuous year. Facing a financial abyss, downsizing, cancelling competitions, community distress, COVID bubbles, COVID hubs, COVID management plans, and really just an incredible amount of hard work. And while I can see that we're not out of the woods completely, I feel like we can see the golden fields of the ordinary just kind of starting to beckon on the horizon. Yes, that's me in the picture, in case anyone is wondering, smelling my rose there. From the outside, people might be forgiven for thinking that Australian sport is pretty much back to normal. After all, we're about to host the Ashes at this very stadium, right? In a little while. But I can tell you that that's far from the case. A couple of headlines. Tennis Australia used nearly all their reserves putting on the Australian Open this year in COVID. That was reported to be in the vicinity of about $80 to $100 million in costs, while the AFL needed to secure loans of about $500 million to get them and their clubs through the crisis. It costs a lot of money to charter jets and live in a COVID bubble. But we can't just think about top-level professional sports, because there's a real and there's a hidden impact at community level, which I fear might take years to reverse. Now, to be a fair question to ask at this point, why should you all listen to me on this topic? Well, I've been CEO now at Netball SA for nearly 3 years, just in time for COVID, which encompasses everything from the Adelaide Thunderbirds, who play in the world's best professional sporting league, to Net Set Go, to beginners in Net Set Go, everywhere from Marla to Mount Gambier, right around South Australia. But I actually started my career here in Adelaide in radio sales, and I started at a radio station called 5KA. Anyone here remember 5KA? Yeah, that's right. Baz and Pilko. That was the start of some 22 years in radio sales for me, which was great fun. There was some glamour and some excitement. I met some famous people, and I went to a lot of concerts and a lot of movies and hosted a few international trips. But it was also constant pressure to meet sales targets, to get the money, to get the money, to get the money. So from a junior salesperson, I worked up to sales director, and a career that started in Adelaide took me to Sydney, where I worked for 8 years, which was absolutely fantastic. I ended up at Australia's #1 radio station, Today FM, running a special group team that looked after the major clients for our radio group. So that was clients like Coca-Cola and Telstra and Ford and Channel 10, and I absolutely loved it. But to cut a long story short, when the second child made her presence known, I decided to accept a job offer here back in Adelaide and return to the land of grandparents and child support mechanisms. That's very hard to do when you're in Sydney. So here's a definite tip for you all. Try to avoid, whenever possible, starting a new job with a challenger brand when you're 7 months pregnant. That challenger brand was Nova FM and Nova 1919, and we launched Nova here on a Friday in September, and I had Kennedy, who's now 17, on the Tuesday, so at least I had 3 days rest, right? That was good. At Nova, I had the most fantastic opportunity to build a very different radio station right from the ground up, and I think there's not many times in your career where you get to build a company right from the ground up. And we launched something very different back then. It was never more than 2 ads in a row. So I got to hire and manage a team of about 42 people across Nova and 5AA, and over 6 years we grew revenue in excess of over 100%. We built an amazing radio station which is still really successful to this very day. I stayed there for 6 years, but after 22 years in commercial radio, I decided that it was time for a change, because I thought 22 years seems like long enough, right? And thus became my perfectly normal career change to the world of cricket at the South Australian Cricket Association. Now, I'm sure the fact that I was wicket-keeper at Northfield High School made all the difference to my job interview. Who in this room's a SACA member? Oh, so you have to be careful what I say with all you SACA members. I remember going for the interview, and I was interviewed by Kevin Griffiths, who's since passed away, but I think it was Kevin Griffiths and Ian McLaughlin, and they said to me, "What do you know about cricket?" And I said, well, I was, wicket-keeper at Northfield High School, and I got nothing. It was like I hadn't even spoken. It was just blank. It was like no sense of humour, that SACA board. So actually looking at that photo, I realised that's pretty much how I felt after a couple of months at SACA, a bit banged up. I started at a very tough time. For those of you in the room who are members, you'll remember that SACA had lots of debt. There was $92 million in debt. We were about to build the Western Grandstand, and our CEO was a man named John Harnden, and he was really nowhere to be found because he was down on King William Road in the State Bank building negotiating what was to become the new SMA. So he was in behind closed doors with Sandful and the Crows and the Power, and it was very, very interesting times. SACA was just about broke, although I think Ian McLaughlin will always deny that, and we had shocking internal archaic systems to work with. There were a lot of people at SACA that cared about the game of cricket, as there rightly should have been, but there was not a lot there who understood the business of cricket. Remember, this was not the SACA of the beautiful redeveloped oval that we're sitting in today. This was before all that. So who in the room remembers when the oval looked like this? Yeah, right? That's actually my office there above the coffee cart. So that was my first office. So there were years of restructuring, not just the grandstands, but the organisation itself to transform it into the big business, the multi-million-dollar business that it is today. My timing was good though, because I started in 2010, just before Cricket Australia decided to launch the Big Bash League. And because it was a commercial entity, as the commercial manager, that was put into my portfolio. So I remember going up to Brisbane to have those initial meetings around the concept of the Big Bash League. And so I became the inaugural general manager of the Adelaide Strikers. And during my tenure, I was the only woman to lead a national cricket team, but thankfully today there are a few more in place. Now, if somebody had said to me in high school, what do you want to do when you grow up? You're never going to say, I want to be the GM of a national cricket team, right? It sounds bizarre. But to cut a long story short, and as history I think has shown, you can now see that it went pretty well. We set an Adelaide Oval attendance record. I think there was one day there we had about 54,000 people in the house. It was an attendance record before the Crows, I think, beat us about a week later. We had the largest home crowd of any team for many years there in the competition. We had the biggest TV audience. We had over 1 million people tuning into every Adelaide Strikers game. We made stars of domestic cricketers who would ordinarily have had no profile without something like a Big Bash League. And more importantly, we attracted a whole new set of fans to the game. And then, as Jason said, 4 years ago, this happened. That was in 2017. Anyone here for that game? Yeah, right. Awesome win against the Hobart Hurricanes, sellout crowd, just absolutely brilliant. So life was pretty good. But after nearly 10 years in cricket, the job came up to lead netball, which is the sport that's closest to my heart. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to merge my professional career with my passion. So that's me there with my 2 teenage daughters. They're a little bit older than that. That was on grand final day because, yes, I do still play and I still umpire for the mighty Gator B1s and the Adelaide Hills. I was really delighted to get the job and I was quite determined to make a difference for netball. And my first task was to put together a comprehensive plan to deal with netball's most pressing issues. And yes, there were some pressing issues that needed to be dealt with, but that was almost immediately thrown in the filing cabinet because COVID-19 knocked at our door. Or for Netball SA, it kicked the door in and set fire to the furniture. One of the issues I've been looking at as a not-for-profit was Netball SA's financial stability and our annual budgets. And as a not-for-profit, it goes something like this. At the start of the year, the fees come in, and then you spend the fees until there's nothing left. And at the start of the next year, the fees come in again. Well, of course, COVID hit just before we got the fees. The netball season was basically cancelled, so there was no season and we had no fees, which meant we had no money. And when I say we had no money, I don't mean that we had no income, I mean we had no money. As a not-for-profit, we just didn't hold reserves. It seems like a long time ago now, but when COVID first hit, nobody really knew what was happening. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of fear. Budgets were thrown out of the window. We lived on cash flow. I did have to quickly get up to speed on cash flow education. Staff were stood down, and JobKeeper really kept us afloat during 2020. And that was just the start. As life began to return from our initial lockdown, I can tell you that everybody was making it up as they go along. In fact, I still think we're all making it up as we go along. To return to play across the state, we had to get approval from SA Health, right? And we wrote plan after plan based on the rules, and then those rules would change. And at one stage, a certain government minister suggested that we divide the court up to sections of the court and have individual players play in a third each so they could throw the ball to each other but stay socially distant. Yes, he did suggest that. Then we had to consider the stadium, plan after plan, and the rules just kept changing. 50% capacity, 50% with masks, 75% with checkerboard seating, cluster seating, no food, some food, security guards, COVID marshals, you get the picture. And surprise, surprise, the rules seem quite different depending on the sport. So 500 people at community cricket was okay. At the same time, we could have 26 people every second court. Like, how was that going to work? And then you throw in a national competition on top of that with borders closing, chartering flights, constant COVID testing, bubbles, you know, a demanding media rights holder. There was one crazy week there in the middle of July where COVID had just broken in Melbourne, and so they were bringing the whole competition to Adelaide, and we were going to be the home of the SSN during COVID. So every team shipped out to Adelaide. They shipped over here. We got them all in. I think we played 1 or 2 games, and then we had the outbreak of COVID with the Argentinian case, so all the teams left. Then we were in lockdown, and by the end of the week, our stadium was a COVID testing site for South Australia. Like, that was in 1 week. It was just crazy. I'm still tired from that 1 week. But throughout it all, as a sports league lead organisation in South Australia, all of our members were looking to us for answers and getting really annoyed when we didn't know. And as the lead organisation's leader, all the staff were looking to me for answers and getting really annoyed when I really didn't know either. Looking back, I call them my D-days, because it was disease, devastation, delay, dislocation and debt. Fingers crossed, the worst is behind us. The borders are opening, and as I said, very soon we're obviously going to be hosting the test match here at this oval. We'll have 35,000 double vaxxed spectators wearing masks just in case. But while we might be getting a handle on the disease and a bunch of those other D words, we're still well and truly living with dislocation and debt. Earlier on, I mentioned that the money that the big sports have been spending due to COVID. Tennis Australia supports tennis right across Australia through the profits that they generate at the Australian Open. This profit didn't just dry up this year. The additional cost basically drained their entire cash reserves, so there's less money now going to grassroots sport. The AFL's $500 million loan. There's only 2 ways to pay that back. That's decrease subsidies to sport or increase prices. And it's those grassroots level and community level sport which just can't be overlooked out of all of this. I put that photo up because I live in Aldgate, and that's what Aldgate feels like playing in. I don't think it can be overstated just how important community sport is to Australia. Whatever sport it is we're talking about, whether it's cricket or netball or basketball, it's just so incredibly important for individuals, for families, for towns and for cities. And for me, this did come as a bit of a revelation. For 8 years or so, I was the president of the Aldgate Netball Club in the Adelaide Hills, and I started out thinking that I was running a sporting club. Well, I wasn't. I was running a community club based on sport. And I think that's a really big difference because it does change your mindset of what your members expect from you. People join a sports club to be part of the community. They're not so they can take home a trophy or become a Thunderbird, right? Very few people are going to become a Thunderbird or a Diamond, although we do have 2 in the room today. I'll never forget at Aldgate there was a beautiful little girl named Aaliyah, and she had childhood arthritis. And on a good day, a really good day, she could play just a quarter before she had to stand on the sideline and it became too much. But she didn't care. She just wanted to wear a uniform and stand on the sideline and cheer for her teammates and be part of a tribe. She wanted to be part of it, and that's what community means to people. And it's really special because what we have here in Australia is far from universal around the world. When I ran the Strikers, I was really lucky that every couple of years we would be taken to the US so we could look at event presentation and ticketing and marketing ideas, etc., so we could bring back ideas to Australia. And we all know that professional sport is huge in America, but it's really only professional sport. There are 300 million fans in America, but not many players, because there's no real culture of community sport. Most people stop playing right when they leave college, whereas here we're absolutely surrounded by it. So at Netball SA, we've got an elite program for the very best, but that represents just a tiny fraction of our 35,000 members that we have right across South Australia. So right across the state, we have team after team of beginners, juniors, seniors, walking netballers who play in the cold and rain just for the love of it. And it's the same for so many other sports, and COVID has hit this sector really hard indeed. A major report's just been released by the Australian Sports Foundation, which surveyed community sporting clubs right around the country and found that, I quote, serious concerns in 3 key areas: devastating financial instability, declining participation, and declining volunteering. Let me give you a few statistics. Nearly 83% of the clubs surveyed had lost money during COVID. They'd lost more than they expected to lose. Government support has only covered about 1/3 of these losses, and about 12% of these clubs are worried that they'll become bankrupt. And that's not good because small clubs find it very hard to raise funds, right, even in the best of times. But it gets worse. 42% of clubs reported a decline in volunteering, in large part due to the increased workload and pressures of implementing the COVID protocols. Now, I hardly have to tell the Rotary Club about the importance of volunteering, right? You guys are the masters. But this is a big issue because you can't have community sport without volunteers. They run the committees, they're the coaches, the umpires, the scorers, etc., everything. Volunteers are sports superheroes. With most people being vaccinated and, slowly the protocols are becoming simpler, so hopefully those people will return. But there's an even bigger problem. Almost half the clubs surveyed reported a drop in participation, particularly amongst those that age bracket of 11 to 18-year-olds. When COVID first hit, as I said, it was right before the start of the netball season, and we had no idea how we could make a season happen. Emerging from lockdown, trying to work with the government to formulate rules, how many people per square metre, etc., etc. The upshot was that a lot of our clubs just cancelled their season. They just found it too hard. Now, even before COVID, we knew that netball, like a lot of sports, had a problem retaining teenagers. Indeed, half of Australian teenage girls quit sport before they're 17, and we know that once they stop playing, they rarely return. So that exodus has been made worse with COVID effectively helping them to cut ties with their club. But my concern is not only for the clubs and the fees or the players that they've lost, it's for the 11 to 18-year-old age brackets, teenagers effectively the ones most in need of social, physical, mental health benefits that they get from being involved in sport. When these people are going through all the stresses and change and pressure associated with being a teenager, community sport can make all the difference, providing activities, goals, friendships, and a really important support network. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to get our sport back to where it was. We not only have to get our elite competition back on an even keel, but we have to restore our community clubs as well. And all, unfortunately, from a much weaker position, with governing bodies like Netball SA having less money and fewer staff. Now, that all sounds a bit doom and gloom, and I'd be lying if I said it was all doom and gloom, because, you know, we've always got to look for a silver lining amongst the COVID clouds. And the silver lining, I think, for Netball SA has been that it turns out when you're trying to stop the walls from falling in, it's a good time to strengthen the foundations. So at Netball SA, we've completely restructured all of our financial processes now. There's not enough money, there's never enough money, but we're much better at managing it. We've reshaped the team and restructured the organisation, putting people in different roles, not just where they'd always kind of been for the sake of it. We've reformed our fee structures and our competition management system and removed some silos that we had in the business. So we're really working beautifully as one team now, which, you know, maybe we could have been better before COVID. We've also got an opportunity to end our hand-to-mouth existence when it comes to annual fees, which we'll be doing. Now, it'll come to no surprise to any of you here that the Oval is South Australia's most utilised sporting facility here, right? Which was renovated using about $500 million of taxpayers' money. But what you might not know, that the second most utilised sporting facility in Adelaide is actually the Mile End Stadium. This one. Bit of a difference. It pretty much goes 24/7, and we have about 450,000 people come through the doors every year. It pumps. So after years of lobbying, it took COVID to persuade the state and federal governments to provide a far more modest $18 million to regenerate what is a pretty old facility. It's 25 years old now. So in the next few years, we're going to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really secure our financial underpinnings with a beautiful renovated stadium. So plans are in the works now, but it will allow us to attract more events, more spectators, host a variety of functions, conferences, etc., which means we'll be better able to support our clubs and associations right across the state. We're talking to the architects now, and over the last few months, I've learned that $18 million doesn't go very far. Cost of steel in COVID is very expensive, and there's still a lot of work to be done to make the plan a reality, but at least now there's a really good plan for netball on the horizon. So more and more of us are getting double vaxxed. Our borders are opening. I might soon be able to take my long-delayed holiday to Bali. Fingers crossed. Things are returning to normal. But for sport, that is going to take longer than most people realise. We're a nation that's always embraced community sport. It's part of who we are, and it provides benefits for so many people. So now it's up to sporting administrators like myself, as well as governments at every level, to make sure that COVID recovery for sport gets the attention, resources and the sheer effort that it deserves. COVID might have kicked the door down, but we've put out the fire, and now it's time to replace the furniture. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Bron. Raj is getting organised. Got time for some questions. Phil.
I hope this is relevant. With your experience in sporting areas, the other day I was talking to my grandson, who's only 14, and when I played cricket and football, we played to win. I said, "How'd your cricket go Saturday, George?" He said, "I got out 3 times." I said, "How does that happen, George?" He said, "Well, you go in and you get a certain number of bowls bowled at you. It doesn't matter how many times you get out."
Yeah.
Now, it's beyond my comprehension at nearly 80, what's happening to this world when we're going soft on kids playing sport, giving them so many extra opportunities. Could you comment on that?
Well, only to say that I'm with you, I'm afraid. I mean, as little as they are, they know if they win or lose, right? They know, and if they win the final, they win every match. They know. So I personally think it's crazy myself. I don't support that at all, but I understand it happens. We have some tournaments. I can think of one at Murray Bridge where they run every age group, and they run under 11s, but the under 11s just all get a medal. Well, they know if they've won or lost. Agree with you. Yeah.
Mark?
Thanks for the wonderful story and adventure and roller coaster. As we work to our better normal, could you reflect on some of the thoughts and perspectives on building better resilience within community organisations?
Gee, it's been really hard. It's a really good question that you ask, because I don't even know if I have the answers, to be honest with you, about building better resilience. You know, I personally think that resilience is something that is either in you or it's not. And one of the questions that I've got over resilience is, when COVID first broke in 2020, we're always told at Netball SA that footy and cricket have to play together, because they're always in regional areas, and footy and cricket, that whatever decision one makes, the other has to make, they follow each other. But what happened to netball in 2020 was all the netball stopped. So I don't know whether women were just less resilient or had to deal with homeschooling or, you know, frontline workers or whatever it was, but the netball didn't go ahead and football did. So you know, for us, it's just been about supporting staff, encouraging them, trying to provide the right resources, and our job is to help build robust netball clubs out in the state. So for us now, it's about supporting all those netball clubs, making sure they've got resources, you know, help with finding volunteers and systems and processes that make them robust clubs, that make people want to go to them. And I think that's our role. But it'd be hard to talk, because I think everybody's personal resilience journey is a bit different. Yeah.
Can I ask you?
Bronwyn, thank you. Can I ask you the impact for the regional areas? We've heard a lot about, you know, the impact generally ad hoc in the regional areas that certain leagues have stopped completely.
Yeah.
Netball, was it more devastating post-COVID, and the outlook that you see compared to the city area?
So, you know what's happened now with netball back last year when sport did return is a lot of netball came back. And I have a theory, because netball lives on the smell of an oily rag, right? Because, you know, anybody who here who's worked in a volunteer netball association, we are just resourceful people, has actually come back. Our numbers have come back okay. Whereas I think some of those footy clubs have struggled, and you know, they pay a lot of those players in those regional areas. So, you know, it's just early days, I think, for me to comment on that. But compared to in 2020, we only had 12 out of 30 associations play, and that's because of what I talked about earlier. They just couldn't deal with COVID protocols. But then last year, they seemed to come back in good numbers. So, you know, my theory is that it's because we just get used to living on nothing. We're able to get back up on our feet.
Bronwyn, I used to run a little small marine business many years ago, and I generally only employ people who play sport, besides the fact they did sail or water ski or something. But sometimes I'd employ people in the office who didn't necessarily be working with customers. And if they were a girl, if they played netball, I thought that'd be fantastic, because I always found that the people who played, particularly team sport, they were far better employees, and they really would work as part of a team. So it's just a comment.
Yeah,
I agree totally with your comment earlier on about being part of a team, and playing in a team is so much better for the young people.
Yeah. During COVID, my netball club didn't cancel. We went ahead in the Hills Association, and I said to a lot of the players in my club, you know, we're only 12 associations are playing, and we couldn't even imagine not playing. You know, even we had a shortened season and we had to make a few adjustments, but we couldn't imagine not being together through that period of time.
Bronwyn, most of us here are from a different era. When we grew up, school was a very important part of our sporting opportunities. And one of the things that was important about that were the teachers, who gave an enormous amount of their time. And secondly, you couldn't play A-grade sport unless you'd actually play in the school in the morning.
Yeah.
We had some interesting issues, however. And in more recent times, I've had a bit of time in New Zealand, where the school system seems enormous in producing the people transgressing up into the upper echelons. And so you're finding a lot of 15-year-olds and playing A-grade in the different sports.
Yes, yep.
And New Zealand really punches above its weight. It seems to me, based on some of, I guess, a pretty limited experience, the bigger sports in the schools, private and government, seem to get the intensity, etc. And I'm aware that more people play soccer than they do AFL, they stop playing soccer when they get to the teenage years. Well, how do you think the school system is supporting the future of our sporting people? Because, you know, I think it's unbelievable that, you know, you want to win. That's the ethos that
Yes.
we need to create. But, you know, I scored a goal today, but my friend scored 6, but I got the medal. That's ridiculous. So how do you think the school system and the role of the teachers is actually now changed? Because I think it has.
Yeah, I think it has too. There's less school in sport. There's still a sporting schools program, and so Netball SA does go out to some schools, although it's really hard for the smaller sports. So let me give you an example. It's really important that we're in schools, because particularly with netball now, we're competing, right, for little girls who might want to play AFLW in the future. And I think probably now netball's lucky that a lot of us haven't grown up. Like, we didn't have it in school, whereas our kids are going to have that offered to them in sporting schools. So being out there in those schools is really important, because if they start off in AFLW and not in netball, we could lose that participation. But, you know, we have a team that has 4 stakeholder relations people in it, and I think we have 1 person who does schools. You know, Shane Bernhardt, who sits in there at SACA, has got 37 people who go out to do schools, right? And AFL's probably got more. So it is, what we try and do though at netball is put them into clubs very early, but the private schools still have quite strong netball programs, and in actual fact they still have to play for their school netball teams, the private schools, before they can play club on a Saturday. So I think the school still plays a role, but our objective, because we're not well resourced in schools, is to try and farm them out to clubs a bit earlier.
Last questions? No? Excuse me.
There's going to be one more here, I think.
There we are.
Look, I really enjoyed your, and I've got 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters, and one on the way, another one. But I think your stadium is very, very important, and that gets media traction. And I think the thing is, netball doesn't get the media traction it should.
It's true, yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Bron. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. You have to come back now. Sorry. You used to order me around like that, so it's my turn today. On behalf of all of us here, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And amazing that you were able to get 2 diamonds. Your presentation was able to get 2 diamonds back into the room.
know.
So,
Awesome. Thank you.
a certificate of appreciation here from us. All the money donated today go to our community and youth programs, and this is for you.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Bron.
much. Thank you. Thank you,
Return to
everyone.
guests.
Thank you.